Hi, friends. Welcome to the Do Life podcast, where we talk about life, its challenges, and some common ways to overcome those obstacles with cutting edge technology, scientific research, and a splash of metaphysical properties. I'm your host, Life Coach Layla. I'm a certified life and business coach, a trained facilitator in the 6-phase meditation, specializing in forgiveness. I'm also studying NLP, RTT, and hypnotherapy. My goal is to share my information and knowledge with as many people as I can and save them the time and effort of doing all of the research themselves. So if that's something that you resonate with, let's see what today's episode is about. Hi, friends. What if I told you that the secret to better relationships, more effective leadership, and even achieving your personal goals isn't found in your IQ, but in something even more powerful? It's called emotional intelligence. And mastering it can transform the way you navigate life. In today's episode, we'll deep dive into how you can harness the power of your emotions, not only to understand yourself better, but in ways to connect with others in a way that unlocks your potential. So stick around, because today could be the game changer that you've been waiting for. Grab a notebook if you'd like, grab a coffee, and get comfortable, because today's episode is a doozy. So what is emotional intelligence? Let's start with the basics. Emotional intelligence, also known as EI, is the ability to recognize, understand, and manage your own emotions, while also being able to recognize, understand, and influence the emotions of others. Think of it as emotional mastery both within yourself and with others. When I did my coaching certification, the first thing we talked about was emotional intelligence and the importance of having a good emotional intelligence in order to better assist people in our coaching careers. I understand why we did a deep dive in that first and foremost, because if you don't have good emotional intelligence, it's really hard to be a good performer in both personal and professional lives, especially in a coaching or managerial role, which I've been in both for a long time now. And the difference between having a boss and a leader, I think, has a lot to do with that emotional intelligence. And we'll get into that a little bit later. We'll talk about how having a good emotional intelligence can improve your professional life as well. But back to the basics. So your emotional intelligence is comprised of 5 key skills, and that is your self-awareness, self-regulation, motivation, empathy, and social skills. And we'll do a deep dive into all of those a little bit later, but those are the 5 key components if you need to know that right off the bat. So why does emotional intelligence even matter? Well, for starters, it impacts every single area of our lives. It helps us build stronger relationships, manage our stress, and enhance our self-awareness in personal relationships in our personal life. It improves leadership, adaptability, and teamwork in our professional lives. And it promotes resilience, self-confidence, and growth in our personal lives. So some studies have shown that your EI, or your emotional intelligence, is actually more important than your IQ, especially in certain positions, such as being a coach, not just a life coach, but even like a sports coach, or like I said, a manager is basically just a fancy name for a coach, because leaders with stronger emotional intelligence have shown to have higher performing teams in general, both sports and out of sports. Research has shown that they can better predict your success through emotional intelligence than IQ, which is crazy to me. There's a study at Yale that has linked the EI to better decision-making and leadership performance. And there's studies in workplaces that have shown that teams led by more emotionally intelligent leaders have a higher morale and outperform others by improving collaboration and teamwork, which that's amazing. So all of that's good and well, but then what happens when you lack emotional intelligence? From my personal relationships, I've learned that the less emotionally intelligent you are, the less interested in learning how to be more emotionally intelligent you are. And again, there's no scientific research behind that. That's just my personal experiences with people. But what are some of the consequences that happen if you're not as emotionally intelligent? There's quite a few, actually. So number 1 is an inability to manage your emotions. Y'all suffer from frequent outbursts, difficulty controlling anger, rage, frustration, sadness. It can even lead to impulsive behaviors or inappropriate reactions. You end up with emotional overload because you're being overwhelmed by your emotions with no ability to process or understand them. Again, I'm not going to sit here and act like I've been emotionally intelligent my whole life. No, this is new and recent and ongoing. And as I'm learning, I'm sharing and teaching. But these were all things that I've struggled with in the past. I've not been emotionally intelligent for a while. And again, learning, it's always a constant growth. Everything is growth and change. And this is a self-help podcast. If you haven't figured that out yet, I'm sorry to burst your bubble or to be the one to inform you. But we're all about self-help and growth and having a growth mindset and changing and doing things for the better. And I did not start off with a good emotional intelligence. And like I said, I'm not even going to pretend that I did. So these are things I've definitely struggled with in the past, and some of them I still do, but being able to understand your emotions and articulate them are two different things, because I'm still not real great at articulating certain emotions, but I understand them and I acknowledge them and I am aware of them. And so that's a level of emotional intelligence that I didn't always have. So emotional overload can also lead to chronic stress. Being in a constant state of overwhelm and constantly stressed out can lead you to a state of burnout and anxiety and poor health, physically and mentally. So that's what having an inability to regulate or manage your emotions does. Number 2 is having a poor self-awareness. Misunderstanding personal triggers, difficulty recognizing emotional patterns, or understanding why you feel a certain way, and lack of growth. Without awareness, it's hard to identify personal weaknesses or even work on self-improvement. And from my personal experience with people who lack emotional intelligence, they don't want to learn or grow. And it's such a weird cycle. And I don't understand. I didn't get into the science behind why we're unwilling to grow or learn or be more emotionally intelligent. I just know from personal experience that people without any kind of I don't want to say any kind of emotional intelligence, but people who lack emotional intelligence tend to want to stay in that mindset, which is so weird to me. So 3 would be struggles in relationships. You're more conflict prone because you'll have a difficulty understanding other people's emotions, which will lead to frequent misunderstandings, problems, inability to resolve issues, more conflicts in general. It's real hard to understand other people's emotions if you don't have your own regulation in place. And struggles in a lack of empathy, struggling to connect with other people's feelings. You can seem cold, unempathetic, insensitive, or dismissive. And these are all things I've been called multiple times by multiple people for, definitely in my less emotionally intelligent days and maybe somewhat recent, because it's harder for me to empathize with someone who doesn't have emotional intelligence and doesn't want to have emotional intelligence. And I'm not going to get into the whole details of all that, but an emotional disconnect can erode away trust in personal relationships and professional relationships. When you're considered cold and dismissive and emotionally unavailable or unempathetic, people are going to see you as that and trust that that's how you'll be, which will cause them to trust you less in areas where they do need you, if that makes sense. And then I guess 4th is ineffective communication, which, again, all of these are very intertwined and make a lot of sense, but ineffective communication leads to misunderstanding social cues. Struggling to interpret tone and body language or even context can lead to awkward interactions. It can also lead to overreaction and withdrawal. You respond, I don't want to say aggressively, but you respond defensively to critical feedback or any kind of difficult conversation. Ineffective communication is basically the demise of the majority of your relationships, personal, romantic, professional, in general. If you don't have good communication skills, life's going to be a lot harder for you. I'm just being so real with you right now. If someone gives you constructive criticism, your first reaction should not be to just defend yourself. And I get we're pre-wired to do that. We want to be like, no, I didn't do that, or I can do this, or I can do better. I didn't mean this. And you want to come up with excuses and reasons and rebuttals. And that's not what it should be about. We're learning to respond and not react. And your response should be to absorb that information. Can I learn from this? Is this coming from a place of love or helpfulness? And what should my reaction be from the other person's point of view? So again, we're learning to respond and not react for the sake of healthy communications. How should we present ourselves as receiving this information to the other person? Are we in a romantic relationship and they're coming at us with some information that could help us improve the relationship, and we're responding defensively, and by doing so, invalidating their feelings and being dismissive? In a professional setting, are we doing the same thing? Are we invalidating their issue? There's a lot of things that can happen to our relationships for lack of communication because of how we respond. And I wanted to take some time on that, because that was something that I struggled with for a while. When I would have any kind of constructive criticism, whether professional or romantic or even as a friend, I would always just be so dismissive and defensive. And I'm not like that. I don't do that. You do this. And that's not how we handle ourselves in a relationship of any kind, because it's not constructive and it's not helpful. And it should be met with, I see where this is a concern. I see what you mean when you say that. My initial reaction is this, or, something else other than just being dismissive. Be understanding. Look at it from their point of view. Like, where is the mindset that they have to come to you with this information? Like I said, is it coming from a place of, hey, I want to help make this relationship better. I want to make this system or process work more efficiently. I want to come to you with this from a place of love. Like, what are their intentions? Because not everybody has good intentions, and you should be thinking about where this information is coming from before you just get so dismissive. But again, we'll get into how to be more emotionally intelligent in the long run. I'm sidetracking myself. But anyway, this was something that I struggled with for the longest time. I was very dismissive and defensive in any of these situations. So I just wanted to sidebar that. So number 5 is difficulty adapting to change. And in addition to the resistance of feedback that we just mentioned, a lack of openness to constructive criticism can stall personal and professional growth. Emotional rigidity can make it hard to adjust to new circumstances or be innovative. So no, I'm not going to get into all that. I'm just going to leave that as it is. Like, there's so many things that could be said about having an adaptability to change. Change is constant. And if you can't go with the flow, you're creating your own currents. So number 6 is some professional challenges. If you don't have a good emotional intelligence, it's going to be real hard for you to learn how to motivate people and inspire and empathize with them and build team morale. And it's been scientifically shown that teams with lower morale have less productivity. I don't know if you've ever had a boss that was just awful and made you hate your job or loathe the idea of being there when they were working, and you do the bare minimum. You do the least amount that you can get away with. You do the least amount that you can do without getting in trouble or yelled at or whatever. And results show that. I'm not going to get into this whole thing, but I've worked for terrible people, and I worked as a buffer. They were a terrible store manager. I'm just going to say that. Yeah. And they didn't know how to communicate with anybody, and they were like a tyrant. We all made fun of them for being a tyrant, and I was the buffer. I was the in-between. So they would yell at me, and I would transform that information and take it to my team in a nice little happy bow and be like, okay, here's what we need to do. Here's where we fell short. This is probably what happened. Here's our game plan. Let's fix it. And we had amazing numbers, and the store did great. And they were in trouble for something and decided to blame me for it. And they tried to write me up for performance, and I refused. Absolutely refused that write-up, because I did so much to save that store. And so I left. I got super fed up. I felt unappreciated, and I was like, you know what? I'm tired of this. Like, the very next day, like, that manager still came up to me and was trying to be tyrannical and made somebody else cry. Actually made 3 other people cry that morning, and then came at me, and I was like, no, actually, you can I put in my resignation that day, and 2 months later, that manager got fired because productivity went to shit, like immediately afterwards, like 2 months. I was there for 5 years, and in 2 months, they got fired for performance, for the performance that they tried to write me up for, because it was them. And then they asked me to come back, and it was a whole thing, and no. You don't get to disrespect me like that. But anyway, I digress. So in your professional life, what were we on? 6? Yeah. So if you don't know how to communicate with people and you just think that because you're the boss, you get to say and do whatever you want, and that's going to motivate your people, it's going to motivate them to do the bare minimum. So there's that. Some other workplace challenges that might come up are difficulty collaborating with other people. So if you struggle with low emotional intelligence, you're going to have a hard time resolving any kind of conflict in the workplace, whether it's between 2 employees underneath you or you and another coworker or any kind of team dynamic. You're going to struggle with managing any kind of interpersonal tensions. And that can also lead to career stagnation. If you're not good at resolving conflicts, if you don't know how to collaborate with people, you don't know how to talk to people, you don't read social cues, you don't do well with change, or you're not very adaptable, all of these things are going to cause you to get passed over for promotional opportunities and career advancements. If you can't pick up on social cues and your manager's talking to you about a position that's opening up and you're like, oh yeah, Judy'd be a great fit. That's on you, boo. I'm just saying. So those are some of the difficulties that can arrive in the workplace. Number 7 is low motivation, which kind of ties to what we were just talking about. But what does low motivation look like? Procrastination and apathy. Without understanding intrinsic motivation, people without emotional intelligence may lack drive or persistence, especially if you're inadaptable to change. You're not going to want to motivate yourself to be more, do more, have more, because those things usually show up with change. So having a low motivation also leads to negativity. You're often going to have a very pessimistic outlook on life and things in general. You'll have a tendency to blame external factors instead of taking responsibility for your own personal growth. You lack accountability. Everything is everybody else's fault. You stay in what we call a victim mindset, where the world is happening to you. Everything is happening to you. This person left me because she's mean, or my boss passed me up for a promotion for the 5th time, even though I've never asked for a promotion or let them know I was even interested, and I just do a really good job at my job and they think I want to stay here forever. So a lot of things. So yeah, having a low emotional intelligence can lead to a very negative outlook, which brings me right into number 8, which is social isolation. Having a lack of social skills can make creating and forming deep, meaningful bonds really challenging. Again, you lack social cues, you lack any kind of empathy. It's going to be real hard for someone to get close to you or want you to get close to them. It can also lead to you feeling misunderstood, which would cause you to self-isolate, alienating yourself, being alone and disconnected and disassociated from a peer group or anybody. And then social isolation leads right into number 9, which is health implications. We as humans are social creatures and need connection and community to feel loved and whole. So some health implications that can arrive are high blood pressure, insomnia, a weakened immune system. We talked about high stress. I've done a whole episode on what chronic stress does to your body, and I can link that to the show notes later. And also emotional exhaustion. When you're constantly stressed and struggling with whatever physical ailments might have shown up, it can lead to mental health challenges like depression and anxiety and frequent outbursts and anger issues. So those are 9 key signs of what having low emotional intelligence can look like and how it can impact our personal, professional, and romantic relationships. So where does our emotional intelligence come from? How is it so different for people who have high emotional intelligence and low emotional intelligence? Like, where did this come from? As with most everything, our upbringing has a lot to do with this. I know I've mentioned attachment theory in a handful of episodes now, but growing up in environments where emotions were ignored, invalidated, overreacted, and conditional can cause can limit emotional learning. So besides our upbringing, our second favorite is trauma. Past emotional or psychological trauma can hinder our understanding and regulation. There's also some cultural factors in I guess that's part of our upbringing too, but some cultures actually discourage the act of acknowledging or expressing emotions in general, so that can hinder your emotional intelligence. And then there's also just the lack of general awareness of having emotional intelligence and what it is, what it means, what it does, what it doesn't do. Like some people just haven't been exposed to the idea or the developmental tools, or they have and they reject it. So if you're not one of those people that rejects the idea of having a good emotional intelligence, there's great news. Having a low emotional intelligence isn't a disorder. It is something that you can develop with intentional practice. So let me give you some practical tools, tips, and strategies that you can practice every day to grow your emotional intelligence. And these are going to tie in with the 5 elements that we talked about earlier, but more in depth and detail and all the things. So number 1 is to cultivate self-awareness. This is your ability to understand and recognize your own emotions. It's about knowing how your thoughts and feelings affect your behaviors, but requesting feedback from trusted friends and family members, practicing mindfulness, meditating, journaling, noticing your triggers. So I bring up my road rage a lot, and noticing my road rage and or lack thereof is a key to reflecting on my triggers and my responses. So when I say practice mindfulness, it's things like that can help you be more emotionally self-aware. Where are your triggers coming from? Why did they trigger you? How did you respond to those triggers? How can you better prepare yourself to respond differently if you desire so in the future? So that's number 1. And number 2 is self-regulation. And now this is different from self-awareness, because self-regulation is your ability to manage those emotions and stay calm under pressure, control your impulsive reactions, and choosing to respond and not react, which is so hard, but it gets better. It's easier the more you do it. But it was hard for me in the beginning, and it's still kind of difficult now because, but yeah, it's choosing how to respond in emotionally charged situations and not react. Some common techniques for self-regulation. You've heard me mention the physiological sigh, where you take a deep breath in through your nose and you audibly sigh out. That helps control your nervous system, but also helps regulate your emotions. That deep breath, that sigh, that gives you a chance to calm down and think before you speak or act. And you can also train yourself cognitively to do that, to take a deep breath anytime you are expected to respond. A lot of beauty pageants will do this. They'll say a buffer like, "That's a great question," or "Thank you for that question." And they'll say things like that because that gives them a moment to pause before they just start speaking. Even though they're speaking, that's like autopilot. They're not really thinking. I was in beauty pageants when I was a kid, and I was actually Miss Missouri in the Monarch International Mermaid pageant. If you don't know that I'm a professional mermaid, you do now. So there's the thing. But anyway, so training your brain cognitively to pause and think before you say something or do something is key to helping you regulate yourself. So yeah, cognitive reframing, shifting your perspective. These are all ways that will help you in your self-regulation. You can do mindful body movements like yoga, tai chi, qigong. And I don't know if I said meditation, but meditation. I'm always going to suggest meditation because I feel like it's like the magic drug that nobody's using and everybody should be. I digress. Where were we at? Okay, so self-awareness, self-regulation, develop empathy is number 3. I feel like cultivating empathy is one of the most important key components in developing a strong emotional intelligence. Because when you can, and maybe this is just me, but I had such a hard time understanding and knowing my own thought process and emotions that putting myself in other people's perspectives and other people's shoes helped me understand my own emotions better. And it made me show up better in the relationship because I understood where they were coming from as opposed to trying to get them to see where I was coming from constantly, if that makes sense. So empathy is basically the ability to share and understand the feelings of others. It's about actively listening, observing nonverbal cues, and truly being present for others to seek out understanding and come from a place of curiosity and not just wanting to respond. Like we talk about that, respond and not react, but also listen before responding. So practice active listening. When somebody's talking, you should be listening to the words that they're saying and not just thinking about what you want to say when they're done talking. And that was a hard one for me to listen, that was hard for me. I'm not even going to lie, because I was so ready to engage in conversation that I wanted to keep the conversation going. And I found myself more interested in what I needed to say next and not actually listening to the person that was talking to me. So just be more mindful of that and observe nonverbal cues. This could be a whole episode on itself, but if you put your hand on someone's back and they run away from you, they don't want you to do that. And if you don't know that that's what that response means, then that's going to cause problems. Not necessarily big problems, but all of the other problems we listed under not having good emotional intelligence, because you're not situationally aware of how your behavior is affecting other people. And that's going to cause them to distrust you. They're either going to think you don't know any better, which you might not, or they're going to think you know and you don't care, which is also a problem, but a different problem. And I don't think you want either one of those things. So just being mindful of social cues and things like that will help you cultivate empathy a little bit better. And that also leads right into number 5, which is enhancing our social skills. So reading nonverbal cues will help you seem safer in a social environment. And social skills can include everything from effective communication to conflict resolution in the workplace. It's basically the opposite of everything we listed under not having social emotional intelligence. This is where our emotional intelligence really shines, is in our social environments, and it's easy to practice. Again, listening without interrupting. It's one thing to listen actively without thinking about what you want to say next, but it's a whole nother thing without assuming you know what the other person is going to say and interrupting them. I've been very conscious of that. I do that often because I just assume I know what they're going to say, and so I just want to continue the conversation for the sake of time or whatever, and I realize that that's so rude and disrespectful. So if you ever catch me doing it, let me know, because I'm actively trying to work on that. And it's not out of a place of disrespect. It's not like I don't care what you have to say. I finish your sentences in my head, and maybe it's a little bit of claircognizance that I have, but I just, I'm trying to be more mindful of that. So being mindful of things like that is how you can practice your social skills. And again, working on conflict resolution, active listening, all of these things. Yeah, like I said, social skills is like everything. So next is boosting your internal motivation. And this is your internal drive to achieve your goals. Having a high emotional intelligence helps you stay optimistic and resilient even in the face of challenges. So some tools that you can use to boost your internal motivation are setting meaningful goals that are aligned with your values to keep you motivated and in alignment. You can use gratitude practices, self-reflection. There's a lot of tips and tools and things out there for motivation. I'm not going to get into all of them. That could be a whole episode. It might even already been. Who knows? But yeah, so what's one small step that you can do today to build your emotional intelligence? Maybe it's pausing to take a breath. Maybe it's writing down 3 things you're grateful for tonight. Some tools and resources if you're interested in doing more of a deep dive, because again, this is a big topic and I'm just scratching the surface. The more I learn, the more I know I don't know, especially about this specific topic. Having emotional intelligence is so important for everything. So I highly suggest you do a deep dive. There are a couple books. There's an Emotional Intelligence by Daniel Goleman, Daniel Goleman, and then there's an Emotional Intelligence 2.0 by Travis Bradberry. Travis Bradberry. Yeah. If you want to see how emotional and intelligent you are, there are some tests that you can do. There is the Emotional Quotient Inventory. It's EQ-I. There's an MSCEIT, Maller Savory Salivary Keva. I'm not. We're not doing that today. Just look up the letters, okay? Stop making me say names that I don't remember. We talked about some of the scientific backing. I don't really think there's a lot of metaphysical in the emotional intelligence. I mean, I feel like spiritual people are more emotionally intelligent, but that's just because they're more in tuned and aware with people on an empathetic and energetic level. So there's your splash of metaphysical for today's episode. So yeah, to recap, we talked about emotional intelligence, why it's important in all of your relationships, what it looks like when you have a low emotional intelligence, some of the reasonings that you might not be as emotionally intelligent as others, and some practical keys, tools, tips, and tricks on how to improve your emotional intelligence and some of the things that can happen because of it. So in closing, I just want to say that emotional intelligence isn't just a buzzword. It's a life-changing skill that affects how we show up for ourselves and for others in all aspects of our lives. So whether you're looking to improve your relationships, your professional life, or you just want to simply feel in more control of your life, then investing in your emotional intelligence is key and always worth it. So thank you for joining me today. Please like, share, subscribe. If you found value in this, send this to somebody that might be open to learning about emotional intelligence. I know I said early in the episode that some emotionally unintelligent people that aren't interested in learning or growth or change might not like this, and I don't want them to hate me. So only send this to people that you think might actually find value in this too. Don't just send this to your boyfriend and be like, this chick said that you're emotionally unavailable. Don't get me involved. I do not want any part of that. Anyway. So if you found value in this, you feel free to share this with someone else that you think will find value in this. And I really do love and appreciate you for being here. Like, share, subscribe, go to my website if you want to dive deeper and get one-on-one coaching with me, or sign up for the newsletter or any of the free giveaways that I will be giving out on there sooner than later. I will leave a link in the show notes below. Again, thank you so much for being here and learning how to be emotionally intelligent with me. I love you. I appreciate you. And let's go do life intelligently. Bye. Thank you.